having conflicts amongst them. So there were ways how these conflicts were solved or were sorted. So in the first place, negotiations between the British and the Germans were used to solve the conflicts. They had to negotiate, they had to agree, they had to sit on table and see what they could do to put an end to these conflicts. Negotiations in the first place were used by the British and the Germans to ensure peace between them. This involved the First Anglo-German Agreement of 1886, and this agreement was followed by the 1890 Anglo-German Second Agreement. So negotiations were made through agreements, and they had the First Anglo Agreement, the Second Agreement, that is the Heligoland Treaty. By 1886, the Sultan's area of control was limited to a 10-mile coastal strip, and the rest of the area was to be in the hands of the Europeans. So the area of control of the Sultan was limited. This later role helped in settling the conflicts or the disputes that had broke up between German and Britain over the 800 miles that the Sultan was controlling. The Sultan also acquired the control of the coastal towns of Bravia, and we have the Melka and many others. So these coastal towns, the Sultan was left with control. So he acquired control over the coastal town. This is what they were trying to do to make sure that there are no more conflicts between the two greatest power. German also, their sphere of influence was to consist of areas beyond the 10-mile coast strip, from river Ruvuma in the south and the river Umba in the foothills of mountain Kilimanjaro. So the British sphere of influence comprised of the areas north of river Umbra and the north of river Kilimanjaro. Modern Kenya was to be German enclave between, because it was smaller than Tanganyika. So modern Kenya was to be left for Britain, and this was because it was too small than Tanganyika. So however, in 1886, the agreement did not cater for Uganda, which led another scramble. So the agreement did not confirm who is controlling Uganda and who is in charge of everything in Uganda. So it did not clarify, don't give them the conclusion of who is to control Uganda. So it made them again to have more questions of who is to control Uganda. So this resulted into the Second Anglo-German Agreement of 1890, particularly known as the Heligoland Treaty. This is the treaty that confirmed Uganda a British protectorate, and it confirmed Tanganyika a Germany protectorate. So Britain got Uganda, and Uganda received Heligoland in compensation. The 10-mile coastal strip that originally belonged to the Sultan was given now to the Germans. So the Germans gave up with their conflict with the British after getting the coastal strip. So Zanzibar, Pemba, and Mafia, these are the two highlands of Africa, were to be under the British supervision or protectorate. So the areas from River Umbra and was extended westwards across Lake Victoria. So in 1894, Uganda was declared a British protectorate. That means Uganda was now confirmed to be under the supervision of Britain. So the Uganda-Tanganyika border was extended westwards to Congo border. So the 1890 agreement also solved the conflict between German and the British. We have lastly effective occupation by the colonial government ended the conflict between German and Britain. So let us look at the effect of the Anglo-German conflicts. The conflict led to the partition of Africa. Uganda and Kenya were made for Britain, and Tanganyika was made for German. So this increased the pressure in the process of colonial partitioning and scrambling for African territories. So the partition of East Africa contemporarily the partitioning of East Africa completely eroded the independence of East African societies. So African societies lost their total independence to the European powers that were having interest in dominating them. So Africans lost their powers, their self-rule to the Europeans after them signing different agreements with them. So new forms of administration were introduced in East Africa, that is to say direct rule, and the British and the indirect rule, which was highly practiced by the British, and the direct rule, this is the rule by force, which was highly practiced by the German, mostly in areas German that are colonized. Look at Tanganyika, look at Namibia, look at Togo, look at Cameroon. All these areas Germany applied direct rule, more so in the areas with opposition. So the conflict increased the tension between German and the British by causing a lot of anxiety and mistrust from each group. Each group was always on tension. Each group was always eager to know what was going on the other side. So these conflicts led to that diplomatic relations, which led to the signing of the first Anglo-German agreement. It led to diplomatic relations between the two European powers. So the Sultan of Zanzibar completely lost control over the coastal strip of the land to the Europeans. There was increased European influx into East Africa. Many of the European groups increased to enter into East Africa. Uganda developed into a protectorate colony, and Kenya became the settlers' colony. This is after the signing of different agreements that confirmed the Uganda and Kenya areas of the British. So the British formed a strong army of the King's African Relief, that is KAR, King's African Relief, to prepare for any cooperation from the Germans in the future. So the King's African Relief, this is an army that was formed by the British to make sure that even in the future the Germans cannot come and oppress them. Still, colonial economic policies were introduced in East Africa, e.g. forced labor and taxation were all introduced in East Africa. Lastly, Africans lost their authority to the colonial masters and they became their subjects. So Africans who were serving themselves on food, time came and they want to be served by their colonial masters. So that is it. That's all about the effects of these conflicts. Still, we can look at the first Anglo-German agreement of 1886, and after we shall look at the second Anglo-German agreement of 1890.